Hey y'all, hey, we gonna have a sew along. I am Marcy of the Handmade Harriells, and this week we're gonna be sewing Vogue Patterns 9253, also known as Vogue Patterns 1735. Thank you very much, Vogue, for that bit of dyslexic fun. Except we're going to be making it as an open robe. It's beautiful, it's easy, and it's also extra. Let's go! So to make this baby, you're going to need some fabric that looks beautiful on both sides. I've chosen this poly burnout, very pretty on both sides. You're also going to need some twill tape. I've got twill tape in two colors, white and black. You can find it in other colors, and if you can only get your hands on white and your fabric is, say, turquoise or teal or chartreuse, that's what Sharpies are for. You could also, go extra and actually dye the cotton twill tape. I'm going to be using 1/4 inch wide twill tape. You don't want to go wider than 3/8 of an inch on this, because when you get to the neckline, if you fold something wider than 3/8 of an inch over, that's going to be too much bulk around your neck. And that's not the look we're going for. Let me show you the look we're going for. Come on over here to the mirror with me. Come on. So this is the hack that we're doing today. If we stitched this pattern up as drafted, it would have a zipper up center back and the front would be closed. It would be a dress. Well, the front is not gonna close on this again right now, even if I wanted to hack it back into a dress, because a little bit of girth here, a little bit inches were required. Bonus, if you make this as an open robe, a couple of inches here or there aren't really going to make that much of a difference. It's still going to hang pretty well on you, as evidenced by my fluctuating body. The neck is open and finished with this beautiful twill tape finish. I feel amazing in this. I can't wait to make another. Let's go. Let's do this. Okay, this is a lot of pattern to cut. So through the magic of YouTube, I'm gonna let my clone get down on the floor and cut out all these pattern pieces. Oh, look at her go. What's she doing? She's using cork tiles so that she doesn't cut on a floofy carpet. That's real smart of her. I'm gonna link these cork tiles below. It's an instant flat surface and they're awesome. While my clone is cutting, I'm gonna show you which pieces you need to cut. Cut piece number 1, upper front, 2, upper back, 3, lower front, and 4, lower back. Omit the pocket and omit the tie. It's gonna be open, so you don't want those pockets flooping around inside, and it's gonna be open, so you don't need a tie. Instruction-wise, ignore sewing center front up, because it's gonna be open, and ignore leaving room for a zipper in the back, because we don't need one. You're gonna sew up the center back seam all the way from hem up to your neck. Now let's take a look at the pattern pieces. You're gonna mark your pleats on the bodice front. You can ignore this little match point at center front because that's where the bodice is supposed to overlap, and again, we're not overlapping. You can mark your notches on your shoulder and on your arm side, on your underarm if you like, but this is a pretty simple pattern. I usually don't advise skipping them notches. You know I love them notches, so if you need some extra assistance, do mark your notches. Do mark your pleats, whatever kind of sewist you are. On this back piece, piece 2, we are going to mark this dart. We're going to mark our notches if we need to. The center back is a center back seam. You don't really super need this little dot there. I'm not sure why they put it there. The skirt piece, she is large. I am a shouty, so I did take out a little bit of length on the length and shorten line here. If you guys want to know more about length and shorten lines, I'll do that in another video, okay? Otherwise, just cut the pattern out as is. This is an open robe. You don't got to get too biblical about it. Do mark your pleat lines here, and you can mark your notch if you want to match it to the waist. You don't need to mark all of these pocket markings because we are not doing the pockets. This is going to make things a lot easier. And this center front seam, of course, you're not going to sew that together because then it wouldn't be an open robe, would it? Now, where's my back piece? Where'd you go? Hello? Okay, here is my back skirt piece. Now this dart is very swoopy. It's got a little bend in it, a little curve. How very Vogue of this dart. So you do want to mark this entire line of the dart because you want to be sure you're sewing up this dart correctly. And I'm going to show you later how to pin that dart together to make sure that you are following the lines, staying inside the lines as it were. You are going to sew up the center back seam all the way. Ignore the instructions that say that you gotta, leave some room for a zipper because we're not adding a zipper. Ever sew up a seam and it's all wavy and wonky along the stitching line? Yeah, that sucks. When you get into that situation, that's right, that situation, what you want to do is sew directionally. You can see here in the line drawings of the Vogue instructions, you've got your skirt pieces. Intuitively, you'd probably sew from the waist down to the hemline because that's just the way gravity goes. No, my friends, no. You want to sew from the hemline up to the waist, from the widest part of your pattern piece up to the narrowest part. That's directional sewing. A lot of the seams we're about to sew aren't completely parallel to the grain line. This side seam is not parallel to the grain line of the fabric, to either the warp or the weft of the fabric. And that means it sits a little bit on the bias. It sits a little bit off grain. So you want to sew from the widest to the narrow to avoid those ripples. Because this is an open robe, you're going to be able to see the insides. So we want our insides to look pretty. Therefore, we're going to use the Ooh La La French seam. This is a lot of pattern and YouTube has a very short attention span. I'm going to step you through a full French seam, but I've got a minified version cut out for you so you can visualize the order of seams we're sewing. All of these seams are going to be French seams. We've got the front bodice and the front skirt, the back bodice and the back skirt. This is center front and this is center back. First up, you're going to sew the center back seam together with a French seam. You're going to leave the center front open. Do not sew this seam. And you're going to French seam the shoulders of the bodice. Here and here, leaving center front open. Got my bodice pieces here. I have already completed one of the French seams. That is the center back bodice French seam, so you guys can see what that looks like. That's the inside of the fabric, and that's the outside of the fabric. There's no raw edges showing. I used contrasting thread for you guys so you can really see what it looks like, and I'm gonna continue to do so because that's just how much I love you. You're gonna lay your back bodice piece down with the wrong side facing up. And here is our shoulder seam. Let me get the corresponding front bodice piece. And I'm gonna lay that bodice piece wrong side down on top of my back bodice piece. So right now, the wrong sides of your fabric are facing. Pin all the way down this shoulder seam. I like to pin at an angle. It's easier to remove the pins that way. It sort of also plays into directional sewing, and that's something that I learned about from Susan Kalji, as I like to call her, the Kaljisi. It works in my head. I don't know if it works when you say it out loud. Now we're going to sew down the seam at 3/8 of an inch. My metric friends, you're just gonna have to help me in the comments with what 3/8 of an inch means in centimeters, okay? There's the first pass for our shoulder seam. We're going to trim the seam allowance down to about 1/8 of an inch SA. Now we're gonna press this seam open. Hey, are you having a good time sewing with me? I'm having a good time sewing with you. If you are, be sure to hit the like button below. You know what? Even, hush, I'm talking. Throw me a subscribe, huh? Ring the bell for notifications so you can get all of the Handmade Harriells upcoming adventures. I believe my iron is ready now. Musical break over. And you can just use the tip of your iron to nudge that seam allowance open. Just the tip. That's pressed open, and now you're going to fold your fabric right sides together and once again press right along that seam line. And now we're going to sew once again from neck edge to sleeve hem at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that's going to finish off our French seam. And there you go, all pretty like, and the insides gorgeous. Because it's gonna be open and we gotta be pretty everywhere. Next up, sew the center back seam of the skirt, remembering to sew directionally from the hem up to the waist. Leave the center front of the skirt open. And then French seam the side seams of the skirt. So you've got an open center front of the skirt and an open center front of the bodice. Leave the waist open once you've reached this point. Right now, I want to show you a trick, a pinning trick that I love that makes it foolproof that you're going to actually land on the dart and pleat lines. This is a dart on the back bodice of this pattern. Now, normally I would mark this in disappearing ink or some chalk, but because I want you guys to be able to see what I'm doing, I've marked this in permanent pink pen. That's how much I love you guys. When I'm cutting out my pattern and marking darts, I like to take a little snip where the dart legs end and then draw my lines, because when you get ready to pin your dart, those little snips can help you start your journey correctly. I don't pin like this because that's not going to help you really stay truly on the dart leg. What I do is I pin through the mark that I've made. And then I flip my fabric over to see just how far off the mark I am, and I'm pretty far off the mark. You just kind of keep going until you get that pin through both marks on either side. And you can check back and forth as you're pinning, and on a finicky fabric like this, it's going to be a little trickier, but it's worth it to go through this and get the pin right on that line. That pin is now right on the line on both sides. That means our stitching is going to be right on the line on both sides. Let me keep it going. Yeah, baby, that's what I'm talking about. And finally, the tip of the dart. When you stitch on this line, you know you're going to be stitching on the proper line on both sides. Same thing for pleats. Here's a front bodice piece. Here are 2 pleat lines. I know they're a little hard to see in this wackadoo fabric, but again, I've clipped right at the start of those pleat lines and I've marked the pleat lines. So now I can fold my fabric right sides together because these pleats are going to live on the inside. All right, come on now. Big money, no whammies. Let's do it. Yes, this just needs one more pin because this is a real short little pleat. There you go. I'm going to show you how I sew them, slowly and carefully removing the pins as I sew, because don't stitch over your pins. Don't stitch over your pins. Don't let me catch you. Actually, just don't let me catch you. It won't be a fun day for us, and I like to have fun days. We're going to start with the dart. Place the notched edge of your dart under your presser foot, and the tip of that pin should be right in line with the center of your presser foot. Lower your presser foot, carefully pull your pin out just a bit so that you're not going to catch your needle on the tip of that pin, and sink your needle. And sew carefully, pulling the pins back and away from the needle as you stitch. And keep a finger on that dart as you're removing those pins. And at the edge of your dart, sew right off the fabric, leaving a long thread tail. That side looks good, and so does that side. And that's how you sew a dart without going all off course and wonky. You're gonna knot your thread ends at the tip of the dart, and you're gonna move on to your pleats. Do exactly what I just showed you with your pleats. I've got my bodice French seamed and my skirt French seamed. I've left the center front of the bodice open and the center front of the skirt open. My darts on my back bodice and my darts on my back skirt are pressed towards center back, and my pleats on my front bodice and pleats on my front skirt are pressed towards center front. Now we're going to finish up this waistline seam once again with a French seam. Take your bodice and your skirt, match up the waistline with wrong sides together, and I'm going to use that same pin trick that I used with the darts and the pleats. I'm going to match up the center back seam and throw a pin right through the seam line of both the bodice and the skirt, and be sure that that pin is going straight through the seam on both the bodice and the skirt. And you can do the same thing with your darts and your pleats and your side seams, and make sure everything just matches up nice and neat. It might be a little finicky here to get this seam allowance pressed open on the waist because of the excess fabric caused by the darts and the pleats and matching up the seams. So you can press the entire seam allowance either towards the bodice or towards the skirt. Just be sure you flip the fabric over and give it another press to be sure that seam allowance is lying nice and flat before you press it together for your final stitching pass. My seam allowance is pressed together, nice and flat. And I am going to pin this seam one more time right through those stitching lines as before to make sure that my side seams and my center back, my darts and pleats are all matching up. Then we stitch this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance and the waistline is done. And there we go. Bodice and skirt are now wedded as one in bliss. We now have to tackle this super long open neckline. Now this is a lot of dress, and I will be using black twill tape along the neck edge of this fabric, which is going to look amazing, but it's going to be impossible for you guys to see on camera. So I'm going to take a remnant of fabric and we're going to pretend that this is the neck edge of the fabric. We're going to lay our fabric right side of the fabric up, then take your twill tape and place it right along the raw edge so that the edge of the twill tape meets the raw edge of the fabric. Throw a pin in just at the start of the seam with the tip of the pin oriented in the direction that you're going to sew. That's the only pin we're going to need because our presser foot is going to do the work for us. I've left myself a little bit of a tail at the end of the twill tape so I have something to grab onto when I'm stitching this. Just makes it a little easier. I'm going to arrange it carefully under my presser foot. The center of the foot is going to lay right along the inner edge of the twill tape because that is the edge that we want to catch. I'm going to make sure the edge of my twill tape matches the raw edge of my fabric. I can sink my needle. I can remove that pin because the needle's holding it in place now. Just be sure I'm all lined up. And now we can stitch right down the edge of the twill tape, the inner edge. Try to get as close to the edge of the twill tape as you can. That's going to make for a neater finish. And as you're stitching, make sure that your twill tape is still matching up with the raw edge of your neckline. And be sure that you caught the twill tape all the way along that seam. Right there, I didn't catch it, so I can go back in there and stitch that little portion down again. But if you sew slowly enough, you're going to catch the inside of that twill tape all in one pass, and it's going to be super simple. And plus, you're going to be using matching thread and a better color twill tape, so you know it hides all manner of teeny mistakes. There she is, the beginnings of the neck edge finish. Turn your fabric over to the wrong side of the fabric, and now we've got to trim away the fashion fabric. You want to be careful not to trim into your stitching, so trim slowly and carefully. Maybe put on some relaxing music. We're doing this because when we fold the twill tape over, we don't want any of that raw edge of the fashion fabric peeking out. If your twill tape is 3/8 of an inch wide, it's going to be easier for you to trim on this step. You'll have more real estate to grab onto and trim away with a 3/8 of an inch wide twill tape. I always buy mine in a 1/4 inch, so I'm stuck with some careful trimming. There you go. That's trimmed. That wasn't that painful, was it? Clean up on aisle 6. I really can't stand a messy sewing space. Let's lay our fabric down again, right side facing down, and we're going to press the twill tape to the inside of the garment, to the wrong side of the garment. Now, from the right side, look at how nice and neat that's going to be. We just need one more pass of stitching to finish this off along this edge. Now you can do it 2 ways. If you've got some sheer fabric as I do, you can actually see through to the edge of the twill tape and stitch on top of this fabric. If your fabric's a little more opaque, you can stitch from the inside, and as we just did, catch the opposite edge of the twill tape with the fashion fabric. Let's stitch that up. I'm going to show you how to stitch this down with the twill side facing up just so you can really see what I'm actually doing. Again, I'm going to arrange my fabric underneath the presser foot so that the center line of the presser foot is just on the edge of that twill tape. And just sew along that edge. You really do want to take your time here and make sure that your stitch is nice and straight along that edge, because these stitches are going to show on the outside of your garment. Of course, your thread is going to match your garment, so there's a little bit more room for error. All right, we've got that last pass of stitching done. We're gonna press it to set the stitches. Pressing is very important, you guys. Like 90% of sewing is not sewing. It's pressing and cutting and trimming and seam ripping and prepping and print placement and so many wonderful things. It really just lies so much flatter once you press it. Many things can be solved with a little bit of steam and a little bit of pressing. Would that everything could be solved with a little bit of steam and a little bit of pressing. And there you go. Isn't that so pretty? Such an elegant finish. The inside has that 2 rows of stitching encasing the raw edge of the garment. And of course, you're going to be using something that matches better, thread that matches better. It gives it a little bit of body, a little more oomph than a baby hem would around your neck. Now on the real deal here, when I'm stitching my super long neckline with my awesome matching black twill tape, I'm going to start at one edge of the hem and I'm going to leave myself 1 to 2 inches of extra twill tape as a little bit of a runway, and then go all the way around from one hem to the other hem. You can use this same finish on the sleeve hem of your garment. We're almost done. It's almost beer o'clock. Actually, it is almost beer o'clock. We're going to meet friends for beer, so I got to get a move on. Let's go. I'm going to use this same twill tape treatment on my sleeve hem. I'm starting at the underarm seam, stitching along just as we did for the neckline. And when I reach the point where I started, I'm going to clip the twill tape, leaving an excess of about 1 inch. Fold that excess under and lap it over the raw edge of my starting point. Stitch right along over that fold, lock stitching at beginning and end, of course. And the raw edge of the twill tape is now encased. You can now proceed with the rest of your twill tape steps. Well, I'm not even gonna pretend like this is the same day, because we went for beers and then it snowed and now it's 70 degrees. And so I finished up magic of YouTube. That's what it's all about, friends. Where did you come from?
Magic of YouTube.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Marcy. I was down there and you know what I noticed?
What did you notice?
I'll give you one guess.
What?
It's kind of dragging on the floor, but I didn't let you guess, did I?
How dare you?
Why is it dragging on the floor?
Because it is not hemmed yet, Rob. And I'll tell you why it is not hemmed yet. Because you cannot hem this on the same day that you sew it.
But did you actually sew it today?
No. I've been busy. We've been having some beers. We've been seeing some friends. I've been zhuzhing the studio. Just pause here for reflection, please. Pause for a close-up. That was a wonderful pause. It was rejuvenating. Rob, you have to wait 24 hours before hemming your garment because you need the bias to drop, Rob.
Gotta drop that bias.
You gotta drop that bias.
Gotta drop that bias like it's
hot.
a beat.
You have to let the bias hang, Rob. You have to let the bias drop.
I like when things hang.
That's what he said. If you don't let things hang, if you don't let things chill, then once you do make your hem, once you do stitch your hem, it's gonna come out all wavy and floopy and a little droopy.
We don't like floopy, droopy, whatever's happening with your hand thing.
We don't.
No, we don't like
droopy.
that.
No, no. So what you're going to do?
It's taking a turn.
It always does, doesn't it?
It always takes a turn. Your brain.
You started it.
How did I start it?
You started it by saying you like it when things hang. After you let your hem hang for 24 hours, you're then going to level it and you're then going to hem it. And I recommend a baby hem. And for that, I recommend that you watch this video right here. That's right here. That's all about baby hems, and it's got more Rob in it And who doesn't want more Rob in their lives?
Baby him. Baby him.
Baby him? What do you mean, like, my name is Baby him?
No, like, baby him. Love him. Kiss him.
Oh,
baby him.
Baby him. Like baby me, and don't call out the fact that my dress isn't hemmed yet. It's your homework now to let your garment hang out for 24 hours and watch another video of us and hem it.
Hem it. Ham it and hem it.
Ham it? Ham it up?
Ham it up.
Oh my God. You know what? We're a little punchy. I think it might be beer o'clock again.
I think it is.
It might be time for a little beer.
Mm-hmm.
Peace out, everybody.
Emphasis on peace.
Yeah, please.